So, Your Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by telling you how honored and grateful I feel about being invited here in this lovely and friendly country of Seychelles. In fact, I have fallen in love. So, I think I feel a bit like Dr. Merope. If you could think of a passport, I would be willing. I would also like to thank UNESCO and the Ministry of Education for inviting me to share some Swedish examples with you. As we have just a short time, I will stick to one or two examples. They are mainly from the health sector. But I will show you how we are trying in Sweden to combine data from the health sector with data from the education sector. But let's start with a legal framework. Dr. Linden mentioned that yesterday. We have something called the official statistics of Sweden. It's regulated, as in most countries, I think. It has to be public and it has to be available. It has to be public or available for research purposes. And the objectivity, of course, is very important, as Dr. Linden mentioned. But it's not only an opportunity, it's also, as I will show you, sometimes a challenge. We divide the official statistics into 22 areas and 108 statistic areas. And when you present it, it should have this official label, as you can see it up here. It's quite small, but so you should be aware of when you are looking at official statistics and other statistics presented. And it's organized in a way, there are 28 government agencies responsible for the official statistics of Sweden. Statistics Sweden is also a government agency responsible for doing all the hard job, collecting the data, the quality assurance and all that. But the 28 government agencies means that when you're trying to apply a more holistic approach to data management or data collection, it's a bit of a job. So maybe that's one of my recommendations if you're thinking about it. Maybe you should not have 28 government agencies responsible. You could probably stick to 14 or something. But those agencies, they form a council, so they meet every twice or maybe 3 times a year to discuss how to present data and who's going to be responsible for which kind of data. And this chain, or this picture, is meant to illustrate our efforts to try to combine data from health sector with data from the education sector. Some of it is quite new, some of it is a very old tradition. But if we begin with the first data collected, as Dr. Fabi said, normally it's during pregnancy. Every pregnancy in Sweden is monitored in a mother and child care center. So that's when data collection begins, of course. I think it's like that in most countries. And then when the child is born, of course it carries on. It follows a special government program when to measure weight and length and when to vaccinate and so on. And there are some very important checkups, and we're going to come back to that 4-year-old checkup in a few minutes. And then when a child goes to school at the age of 6, when children start school in Sweden, normally that medical record from the child care center is transferred to what we call the pupil's health or student health. There's a nurse and sometimes a doctor in every school in the country. And every nurse and doctor is also obliged to stick to a government program for checkups and controls and vaccinations. So it means that in the normal case, all the information from the very beginning is kept through the system until the child leaves compulsory school at the age of 16. And then there's also, of course, data concerning literacy and other skills checked up and controlled by a national test system. And here we have quite a new example that I'll show you later, where we are combining data from a national test or diagnostic material with data from that medical record. So, but let's start from the very beginning, which means when a child is born. Sweden has been monitoring the growth of children since the 1930s, as far as I know. And it's because the growth curve, it's an indicator that's quite an aggregated data. If you look at it, it might tell you a lot about the living conditions of a child. It's a sensitive indicator of physical and mental well-being. So the World Health Organization has stated that every child has the right to an individual growth curve. I think you're all very familiar with it. And the WHO states that there are three main reasons for measuring growth. So it's to monitor the child's health. It's abnormal growth in any way may be a sign of a disease or social stress, maybe abuse. And to promote health, for instance, which is very common in Sweden and other Western countries, an increase in body mass index might signal, well, let's talk about nutrition, diet, to prevent obesity. And it's also, and this is very important, and one of my bullet points, for monitoring long-term changes on a population level. Thanks to all those growth curves in Sweden, we have been able to find out that the rise in body mass index in Sweden stopped 20 years ago. It is still too high among 8-year-olds, but it stopped. The rise stopped. And now we're gonna look at this 4-year-old checkup. We're about to meet Rebecca. She's visiting the childcare center. And, okay. So let's see if you can hear the sound. Well, she's talking in Swedish, of course, so maybe it's not the point to hear her. She's visiting the childcare center for her 4-year checkup. So the nurse to the left here is, in the beginning, she's interviewing Rebecca about her favorite food, about sleeping habits and relations, parents, etc. But what we see here under her arms is the growth curve of Rebecca. So she's following a program for this checkup, and we'll go a bit further. So Rebecca's doing something. Here it comes. Yeah. So here's the nurse trying to check up Rebecca's fine motor skills by asking her to make a necklace out of a straw and some small things. Yeah. And she's taking notes, of course, during the whole visit. And then a bit of hearing control. And here's to check about her sight. So, and at the same time, a nurse can check for Rebecca's, how many letters she knows. Yeah. Let me see. And in the end, she's checking up her balance. I guess you're familiar with such checkups. And her weight, of course. Yeah. But I think the main point is that in the normal case, we would transfer this data to the school nurse so she can keep monitoring Rebecca's growth and her health about vaccinations, etc., through the school years. And as, let's see, maybe I need technical assistance because I'm not able to change. Yeah, here it comes. It's a bit slow. Yeah. So I talked about a new diagnostic material from the first grade. It's the ones at the left side. So what we're doing now is that some of the questions, some of the results rather, are supposed to be collected by the school nurse and then registered in a national database and combined with data from medical records. It's only for the group level, of course. It's not for an individual checkup. That is done on the school. But for the first time, we can combine literacy skills with other data from the early years. This is something completely new. I might come back in 3 years and tell you about it if I'm allowed. And since I think my time is running out, I'm looking at Dr. Fabi, I will end this presentation with my takeaway messages. We have some examples in Sweden of indicators, for instance, group size. We didn't pay enough attention to define group size. We are still collecting group size in preschools, but it's quite a useless indicator. So be aware of that bad Swedish example. Define your indicators. And also define or decide about some indicators for long-term purposes. I mean, several decades. There are things like, already defined by UN organizations. But if you decide about your own indicators, think of the ones you need for several decades of monitoring. Well, I think that would be all. Thank you.